The moment Thomas slid the divorce papers across the restaurant table, the world around me dimmed. The crystal chandelier above us fractured into trembling shards of light, and the steady hum of conversation around the room became nothing more than a muffled drone trapped underwater. 30 years, 3 entire decades of my life, collapsed into a single white stack of paper sitting between the candles and the champagne glasses. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears, sharp and relentless, as though my heart was trying to break free from the wreckage. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I once believed was my shelter in every storm. His jaw always clenched with self-importance, his eyes cold and devoid of regret, the faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips as though the destruction of my life was a minor inconvenience he was resolving before dessert. My hands trembled on the linen tablecloth, my breath hitched. Tears collected, but none fell. Pain twisted sharply through my chest, but even sharper was the realization that he had planned this, prepared it, rehearsed it. And then he whispered the words that extinguished the last light inside me. "She's waiting in the car." His voice didn't waver. Mine shattered in silence. I rose only because my body remembered how to move when my mind couldn't. I walked outside, legs unsteady, the cool night air slicing across my skin. When I reached the curb and saw Lillian Cross, my closest friend, sitting comfortably in Thomas's car, wearing my perfume, wearing the pearl earrings I once gifted her, my knees buckled. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. And I vowed, as pain and betrayal twisted into something sharper, Thomas Carver would regret choosing humiliation over honesty. If you've ever been blindsided by the person you built a life with, subscribe before someone like Thomas teaches you the lesson too late. My name is Evelyn Carver, and before all this, I believed good wives endured. I believed strength meant patience. I believed a quiet home was the same as a happy one. I was 22 when I married Thomas, young, hopeful, breathlessly naive. I had lost my parents early, too early, so I had no model for what marriage should be. Thomas appeared dependable, disciplined, a man who believed in tradition and order. I mistook his rigidity for reliability. I mistook his silence for depth. I mistook his demands for care. The start of our life together was simple. We lived in a small apartment above a bakery. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread floated into our window, warm and soft, carrying with it a sense of promise. I worked as a secretary at a law office. Thomas worked at an insurance firm. We saved carefully, budgeting every dollar, building what we thought was a future worth protecting. When our daughter Caroline was born, Thomas softened in ways that took my breath away. He held her as though she were made of spun glass, memorizing every inch of her tiny face. When Philip arrived, his pride doubled, though his affection remained guarded. He was a provider, not a nurturer. He believed showing love outwardly weakened a man. I accepted this. I adjusted myself around him like furniture expected to fit a room. But quiet cracks formed early, even if I ignored them. Our 10th anniversary was the first warning. Thomas handed me a beautiful silver bracelet, and I felt tears sting my eyes. But the moment I whispered, "It's beautiful," he said flatly, "Don't get emotional, Evelyn. It wasn't cheap. I deducted it from our vacation fund." His words stung. Not because of the money, but because he dismissed my emotion like it was dust he brushed off his coat. I laughed, embarrassed, pretending he had meant it as a joke. Inside, something small and tender shriveled. Over the years, Thomas took full control of our finances. For order, he insisted. For stability. It's better if I manage everything. I agreed. I believed marriage required trust, and trust, I thought, required surrender. I didn't realize then that I was slowly placing my entire life into the hands of a man who would one day weaponize it against me. But life keeps moving, even when cracks go unnoticed. The children grew. The house became a home. I returned to part-time work, and I met Lillian Cross. Lillian was unlike anyone I had ever known. Warm, lively, quick with a joke or a hug, she listened when Thomas didn't. She noticed when I looked tired. She held my hand through worries and laughed with me through joys. I trusted her. I trusted her so deeply that she became my safe place, the sister I never had. If someone had told me then that she was the one Thomas was financially supporting behind my back, the one he was secretly promising a new life, I would have defended her with tears in my eyes. But betrayal wears the face you trust the most. The first twist revealed itself on a rainy afternoon. Thomas came home later than usual, coat soaked, shoes muddy. He tossed the coat onto the sofa, a careless act, uncharacteristic of his usual neatness, and went upstairs for a shower. I picked up the coat to hang it properly. As I did, a folded letter fell from the pocket. I should have left it. I knew that. But something, intuition perhaps, told me to look. The handwriting wasn't mine. The tone wasn't casual. The content was unmistakable. My dearest, thank you for supporting me all these years. I am grateful you promised me a new life soon. The wife won't be a problem much longer. My hands trembled violently. My breath came uneven. The room swayed. When Thomas returned downstairs, I confronted him, tear-stained, shaking, desperate for honesty. He showed none. "It's nothing," he said, voice cold. "Someone else's letter." Someone else's letter that thanked him for financial support, for promising a new life? He dismissed my pain like an irritation. That was the first twist. The second came slowly, quietly. Lillian began avoiding me, canceling lunches, declining calls, offering excuses that didn't sound like her. At first, I worried she was overwhelmed. Then, I wondered if I had done something wrong. Never, not once, did I imagine she was the woman in the letter. But betrayal rarely announces itself with thunder. It seeps. It whispers. It hides behind familiar smiles. As our 30th anniversary approached, Thomas softened strangely. Flowers, rare. Words of kindness, rarer still. Quiet dinners, unexpected touches. Hope bloomed in me again, timid but persistent. So when he invited me to a fine restaurant, white linen, crystal glassware, candles flickering softly, I believed we were rebuilding. I allowed myself to believe he wanted to renew our vows. I allowed myself to believe love had found its way back. But hope is a dangerous delusion. He reached into his briefcase. I held my breath, waiting. Instead of a velvet box, instead of a promise, instead of an apology, he placed divorce papers in front of me. Then he said the words that became a blade. "She's waiting in the car." When I stepped outside and saw Lillian sitting there, the woman I trusted with my whole heart, my world collapsed. But beneath the collapse, something sturdier rose. Resolve. Cold, quiet, sharp. A woman betrayed is dangerous. A woman awakened is unstoppable. The humiliation didn't end at the restaurant. It spread like ink through water, staining parts of my life I didn't know could be stained. Thomas didn't offer me a ride home. He said, "I have plans," and turned his back and walked toward the car where Lillian waited. I stood on the sidewalk, hugging my arms around myself as the night wind cut through my dress. I called a cab, my voice barely steady enough to speak. The ride home felt endless. The driver silent, the city lights a blur. That should have been my second warning. But shock clouds awareness. 2 days later, I was invited to dinner with Caroline and Philip. I thought they wanted to check on me. I was wrong. Thomas had already told them everything. His version, anyway. "We're divorcing," he announced calmly. Lillian entered the room seconds later, smoothing her dress like she was walking down an aisle. My children gasped, confused, stunned. Thomas began painting me as the villain, unstable, cold, unwilling to meet his needs. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Thomas cut me off, speaking over me with practiced ease. Caroline cried quietly. Philip glared at him, jaw clenched, but even he looked uncertain. That should have been my third warning. But grief kept me silent. Church was worse. Whispers followed me through the pews. Eyes avoided mine. Murmurs floated like poison. Poor Thomas. She drove him away. She never appreciated him. Then Thomas and Lillian walked in together. Hand brushing hand, smiles coordinated, and hollow. I felt as though the floor would open beneath me, but I swallowed my humiliation and stood tall. Not long after, a bank notice arrived, then another, and another. My name had been removed from our accounts. Debts appeared under my signature, bills unpaid. Credit cards opened, funds moved. It was systematic, cold, calculated. Thomas wasn't leaving me, he was stripping me bare. Then came the envelope, handwritten, elegant, from Lillian. "You are invited to our engagement dinner." The date? The anniversary of my mother's death. I felt the room sway around me. Cruelty, once masked, had grown bold, brazen. But something inside me shifted. But by then, I was no longer the Evelyn who endured quietly. The truth arrived not as a whisper, but as a blow. It came from Walter King, our elderly neighbor, a man whose honesty was as dependable as the sunrise. He visited one evening, hat in hand, worry etched into the lines of his weathered face. "Evelyn," he said, gently, "may I speak with you a while?" I invited him inside. My heart thudded nervously, intuition warning me that the ground beneath me was about to fracture. Walter sat at my kitchen table, removed his hat, and sighed deeply. "I've been wrestling with this," he began, "but I can't keep quiet any longer. Thomas has been planning this for years." The words stung worse than any slap. "What do you mean?" Walter reached into his coat and pulled out a thick folder. "I overheard conversations I shouldn't have," he admitted softly. "And I've seen documents, transfers, meetings with that woman. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it wasn't my place. But this is beyond marriage troubles." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were bank transfers, substantial amounts from Thomas to Lillian for over 5 years. Hotel receipts, romantic weekends in cities Thomas claimed were business trips. Emails, cruel, calculating exchanges about how to remove me from the picture. Forged documents, signatures that mimicked mine with dangerous precision. And a recorded conversation. Walter's final piece of evidence. His hands shook slightly as he set a small device on the table. "Listen," he said quietly. Thomas's voice filled the room, cold, clinical. "Evelyn will sign anything if we make her believe she's the problem." Lillian's voice followed, sugary and venomous. "She always has. She trusts you too much. Just push her out gently." My heart broke in a way I didn't know was possible. I felt my breath leave my lungs. My fingers curled into the table's edge. Walter placed a comforting hand over mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered, But you deserve to know the truth." Tears burned my eyes, but beneath the heartbreak, something began to harden. Resolve, determination, a clarity sharper than any blade. If they had planned my downfall, then I would plan their reckoning. In the days that followed Walter's revelation, my mind swung between grief and icy focus. Every word Thomas and Lillian had spoken in that recording replayed in my head, each one slicing through layers of denial I didn't know I still carried. It was not just betrayal. It was strategy, a coordinated dismantling of my life. And now, I needed a strategy of my own. The next morning, I made an appointment with Gordon Blake, a lawyer known across the county for handling complex financial cases with immaculate precision. He had a calmness that wasn't cold, but steady, like a man who understood storms and had learned to stand tall in them. As I sat in his office explaining everything from the letter I found to the betrayal at the anniversary dinner, he listened without interruption. He took notes quietly, occasionally lifting his eyes to study me with a seriousness that steadied my spiraling nerves. When I finished, he closed his notebook and said, "Mrs. Carver, you have far more leverage than you think." Something shifted inside me, a small breath of power, a small glimmer of possibility. He continued, "Thomas has left a trail of misconduct. With the evidence you've brought and what we can obtain, we can protect you legally and financially. But we must move strategically." I nodded, willing to follow every instruction. We scanned every document Walter provided. Gordon subpoenaed additional financial records. What Thomas believed he had hidden was now being quietly exposed. Gordon advised I speak with Thomas when possible, but always over the phone, always with recording enabled. He said, "People who believe they've already won grow careless." He was right. Thomas called often, not out of concern, but to ensure I was cooperative. I acted timid, lost, afraid, like a woman broken. He revealed his plans freely, his desire to keep the house, to maintain the clean image, to rush the divorce so he could start a family with Lillian. Every word, every arrogant slip of the tongue became ammunition. I met privately with Charlotte Pierce, the event coordinator for Thomas and Lillian's engagement dinner. Charlotte was a woman with keen instincts. As I relayed everything, her face shifted from shock to outrage. She said, "That woman sat in my office and bragged about how she finally won. She acted like you were some obstacle she had gracefully overcome." I clenched my jaw to keep my voice steady. "I need your help," I told her. "Not for revenge alone, but for truth." Charlotte nodded sharply. "You'll have it, whatever you need." Together, we planned the sequence. Lights dimmed at a precise cue, projector on, slides of documented evidence, audio recording of their conspiracy, officers positioned discreetly at the back of the hall, my entrance timed to perfection. It wasn't just revenge, it was revelation, and it demanded dignity. The night before the engagement party, I sat alone in my bedroom, the same room that once held whispers of hope, arguments, tears, and silence. I looked into the mirror. My face carried lines of pain, yes, but also resilience. A woman who had been pushed to the edge and found a stronger footing. I whispered to my reflection, "You will not be erased." The storm was coming, and I was ready. The engagement hall glowed with gold drapery and polished marble floors. Soft music drifted through the air. Guests, some familiar, some distant, mingled with drinks in hand, unaware that the night they expected to be a celebration would become something entirely different. I arrived 10 minutes after the event officially began. When the doors opened, my heels echoed across the hall. Voices fell silent, heads turned, eyes widened. Thomas stood near the stage, holding a champagne glass midair. Lillian clung to his arm, wearing a dress the same shade of lavender I once told her was my favorite color. Caroline gasped. Philip's jaw clenched tight enough to crack a tooth. The room held its breath as I walked toward the center. Charlotte nodded from the side. Our signal. The lights dimmed. Conversations died instantly. A projector flickered to life behind me. Slide 1. Bank statements showing large, consistent transfers from Thomas to Lillian. Murmurs rippled across the room. Slide 2. Hotel receipts with their names printed clearly. Gasps erupted. Slide 3. Screenshots of emails, ones where they mocked me, strategized, plotted. Lillian's breath caught audibly. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. And then came the final blow. Charlotte pressed play. The audio recording began, filling the hall with their voices. Thomas, we need to get rid of Evelyn cleanly. She won't fight. Lillian, she never does. She trusts too easily. A hush fell, so heavy it felt physical. Gasps, hands over mouths, people stepping back from Thomas and Lillian as though their proximity alone carried contamination. Thomas lunged for the projector. Too late. 2 officers stepped forward.
Thomas Carver, one said firmly, you are under investigation for fraud, forgery, and coercive control. Lillian shrieked, grabbing his sleeve. Thomas, do something! He jerked his arm away from her. His mask cracked. The calmness he prided himself on vanished, replaced with raw panic. He screamed at me, you ungrateful! I stepped forward, feeling a stillness settle over me. No, Thomas, I said softly. This is your doing. I simply stopped letting you rewrite the story. The officers moved in. Guests watched in stunned horror as Thomas was handcuffed. Lillian sank to the floor, sobbing, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The room, once filled with music, was now filled with truth. If you believe truth always wins, subscribe and stay with us. The days after the engagement night were a whirlwind of consequences, swift, devastating, and entirely deserved. Thomas. His accounts were frozen. His employer placed him on immediate suspension pending investigation. Friends he thought he controlled or impressed began distancing themselves. The firm's board issued a formal notice of misconduct. He faced charges of fraud, identity misuse, and financial manipulation. His arrogance, once towering, crumbled. Lillian. Her reputation shattered overnight. Her family withdrew. Her employer terminated her quietly to avoid association. She attempted to contact me multiple times, but I blocked every call. I owed her nothing. The divorce proceedings swung entirely in my favor. Gordon Blake ensured that. I kept the house. I received a comfortable settlement. Lillian's financial involvement was exposed. Thomas's misconduct was documented in court. All fraudulent loans were nullified. My name was cleared. Caroline apologized through tears for believing even a fraction of Thomas's lies. Philip vowed never to treat any woman the way his father treated me. In the quiet months that followed, peace slowly returned. I painted the living room in a warm cream shade. I planted camellias along the walkway, my mother's favorite. I began reading novels again, ones I had once loved but abandoned over the years. I cooked meals just for myself, not out of obligation, but enjoyment. I lived, not for Thomas, not for expectations, not for image, for me. I found myself again, not in revenge, but in the space revenge created. One afternoon, as I sipped tea on my porch, a gentle breeze rustled the camellias. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that made the world feel soft. And I realized something. I was free.
free from the weight of a loveless marriage, free from lies, free from betrayal, free from the quiet death that comes from shrinking yourself to fit someone else's needs. Freedom, I discovered, is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet evening breeze. Sometimes it is a cup of tea held in steady hands. Sometimes it is simply waking up and feeling whole. Months later, I sit on my porch in the peaceful twilight, listening to the cicadas hum their evening song. The sky shifts from gold to violet, and the world feels both fragile and infinite. I think about the woman I used to be, the woman who endured, the woman who forgave too easily, the woman who silenced her own needs for the comfort of others. I wish I could reach back in time and place my hands on her shoulders. I'd tell her, you deserved tenderness. You deserved partnership. You deserved truth. But I cannot go back. I can only honor her by living differently now. I learned that betrayal does not diminish your worth. It reveals theirs. And surviving cruelty is not the end. Building yourself afterward is. I am Evelyn Carver. I was humiliated. I was betrayed. I was discarded. But I rose. Not in rage, but in truth. And truth is the strongest weapon a woman can wield. Tell me in the comments, have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? And if you're still not subscribed, what's holding you back? Thank you so much for listening. See you in the next story.